In the streets of a high-tech cyberpunk future, many ruling powers strive for control over the human sphere and its many core resources. Today, we are going to be looking at those factions, covering their basic lore, playstyle, strengths and weaknesses, and some basic unit recommendations. Let's get right into it. PanOceania is the greatest power in the human sphere, a melting pot of culture and tradition. High-tech soldiers bearing powerful armor and weaponry, along with futuristic knights, well-trained light infantry, and tactical armored mechs are what make up the bulk of the PanOceania faction. In the human sphere, they are well known and feared for their military might and their technical strength. PanOceania wins by its superior firepower. With the help of some of the best mechs in the game, they hold a shooting strength that allows them to easily decimate opponents from afar. Then move in with close-range fighters and specialists to win the mission, forcing their opponents to cower before their mighty weapons. PanOceania has access to some of the best shooting pieces in the game, with a lot of technical options to back them up. They also have a plethora of units with high armor and ballistic skill, meaning that they will always win in a direct firefight. The main downside to the PanOceanian faction is that they lack access to smoke and have a weak hacking game. Now we're going to be looking at some of the sectorials of the PanOceanian faction. These are some of the subgroups that exist inside the PanOceanian sphere and army. Military orders are a Solus group, a medieval-like military group resurfaced in the modern age. They bear a powerful order of knights, including figures like John of Arc. Serving under the church, they have the freedom to execute orders outside of what other military groups are allowed. Cybernetic knights brought into the modern age, ready to complete their duty with honor and religious fervor. Military orders intends to strike fast and at a distance, using its heavily armored knights as a core to back them up, shipping at enemies from afar while sending out units like the Trinitarians to disrupt the midfield and complete objectives. Military orders are currently on the weaker side of the PanOceanian sectorials. Their strength lies in their durable units that are both great in range and melee, with access to some good but expensive midfield options to back them up. Their weakness is a lot of their units are very expensive, meaning that you have a tight group that you control. They're also very hackable. A lot of the units of the military orders are heavy infantry, and without a good hacking strength to back them up, it means that they are very susceptible to hacking attacks that stun them. My recommendation for the military orders are Harris of Teutonic Knights, the Motorized Knights of Montessa, the Trinitarians, and the Tikbalang's Tactical Gears. Over to the watery planets of Varuna. The forces are some of the most well-trained soldiers inside the PanOceanian army. The beautiful oceanic planet serves as a training ground for the front lines of the hyperpower. The Snake Eaters are a special division, and the frontal and first defense against any threat to the hyperpower. Despite what their name may imply, Varuna focuses on an unbreakable defense line. They use powerful fire teams with amazing gear to cover the longboard, access to short camouflage pieces that fire at full burst in reaction, cover their side of the board extremely well. In the active turn, they attack with powerful pieces like the cutter, which are almost unmatched in terms of raw shooting potential. They strike from afar, then jump in with fast specialists to complete the mission. Varuna are fairly strong factions that cover a lot of base as well. Their hard defense line is unique and one of the best in the entire game. They also cover great shooting pieces and have access to fairly strong specialists that can deploy in infiltration. I would recommend for Varuna to hold the Cutter tag, the Helots, the Sulu Cobra, and the Motorized Knights of Montessa. From the ever-frozen planet of Svalorheima, the Winter Force of PanOceania are a small force that fight and protect over the many small but valuable resources of the planet. They are ready to face off against any threat in the deadliest of conditions. Svalorheima plays a game of aggression. They have amazing guns and fire teams that can create a hole in any opponent. Their goal is to push the opponents down completely, ever pushing forward with their powerful skirmishers like Lian Kai or their armored behemoth of the Jotun. They play a direct game and have the tools to traverse and decimate opponents like a slow snowball rolling down a mountaintop. Svalorheima are fairly strong due to their fast mobility and their great firepower. Their strength lies in their fast units, with the ability to traverse and climb over terrain. They have amazing gear and weapons, and strong melee options to skirmish through the midboard. Their main weaknesses is that they lack a great option for midfield camo. They lack any sort of indirect attack and focus more on an aggressive approach. My recommendations for Svalorheima are the Karhu, Liankai, and the Jotun. From the industrial planet of Acontecimento, the forces here are rough and hardworking. They reflect the hard-working people of the planet through the grinding gears and many conflicts that they have experienced. The guerrilla tactics of the Acontecimento shock army make them stand out for their aggression and indirect approach to winning conflicts. These jungle-hardened troops excel at close-range options and are used in operations across the human sphere due to their great and excellent navigation of harsh terrain. A lot of units of Acontecimento play different roles at the same time, allowing them to change tactics on a fly. For example, their regulars excel at having different skills and weapons that can be effective in different situations. Using mines and foxholes, they protect their deployment fairly well, while other units like the Knights of Montessa or the Tikbalan rapidly approach out of their deployment to inflict massive damage and complete the objective. Due to their variety of immersing profile, the shock army of Acontecimento are a very strong faction, both in offense and defensive capabilities. Their strength lies in their tags and specialist options. They also have a fairly strong defense and good camo choices to back them up. Their weakness is that they rely on a few important pieces to complete the mission. My recommendations for the shock army are the Tikbalan, the regulars, the Bakmari, and the Knights of Montessa. The Neoterran capitaline army are equipped with some of the best tech and weapons that Pano have available. They are the backbone of the faction. Hailing from their capital world, they are the strongest and the most advanced power that PanOceania has at their disposal. Neoterra excel at shooting almost more than any other faction. Their fire teams offer some of the strongest shooting in the entire game. They have great tech and access to fast and effective small fire teams that can easily disrupt the opponent's midfields while still completing objectives. With the addition of recent units, Neoterra has become one of the stronger sectorials for the faction. Their strengths rely on their firepower, their strong fire team compositions, their options to field indirect and offensive units. Their weakness is that they still lack smoke and can suffer to hacking. My recommendations for Neoterran are the Bolts, the Auxilia, and the Swiss Guard. Standing in direct opposition to PanOceania is Jing, the second greatest power in the human sphere. Jing combines tradition and power to rule over its many nations. Mostly composed of Asian influence, they hold a balance between cultures, and they keep ever expanding in size. Their goal is to eventually overtake the human sphere in the greatest human force that has ever been seen. Jing is a versatile faction. Think of them as a jack of all trades. Their units cover everything from shooting to close-range fighting and strong hacking options. Because of this, Jing can be approached in many different options, and that strength is something that changes from game to game. In general, you can expect a very solid shooting piece that can dash through the board to open areas for specialists to complete objectives. Jing has a range of options that allow them for a fairly balanced game, and they can be considered a decently strong faction for that. They have strong individual pieces that fill niches very well. Their weakness is that they're a jack of all trades, but a master of none. They have no best-in-slot pieces, and their best units are often rather expensive and order-intensive to use. The Imperial service are the precise weapons that uphold the structure of Jing. They specialize in control and covert operations to root out any problems that may arise inside the faction. They are notorious for their cruel and severe methods, which they use like a needle to root out any infection, whether civilian or otherwise. They are the Emperor's hands. Imperial service works best when taking advantage of their variety of strong remote options. They back these up with a solid core defense fire team and midfield specialists to win the mission. Imperial service is one of the weaker sectorials of the Jing faction. Their strengths rely on the axis from the many units from Aleph, their strong remote presence options, and their solid midfield attackers. They are weak to hacker, as most of their attack pieces are remotes. They also have weak support options to rely on the other remotes and structure units. They rely on a few expensive pieces. My recommendations for the Imperial service are the Xian, the Suzhang, the Guangxi, and the Crane agents. The Invincible army is the shining icon of Jing. They employ heavy infantry soldiers and power armor in a show of power and dedication to the country. They are Jing, and as long as the Invincible army stand, Jing will hold strong no matter the situation. Even if other sectors fail, as long as the army stands strong, they will prevail. The Invincible army allows Jing to play a core of heavy infantry models in a team to move up the board and decimate any reaction piece that the opponent might put up. They're also great at dealing with skirmishers. This is the faction to play if you want a heavy armored tank deathball to run over your opponents. They always need to play around hackers, either by using midfield pieces to kill them or staying outside their range. At the moment, they are not super strong. Their weaknesses can often overshadow their strengths. They, as a heavy infantry faction, are very durable. They allow for a core of fire team of strong and armor units. Their weaknesses is that they're almost entirely composed of hackable units. My recommendations for the Invincible army are the Shangji, the Haidao, and the Daojing. Svalorheima is a planet of many powers, constant conflict, and harsh conditions. White Banner is the offensive tool that Jing uses to overtake the plentiful resources of the planet. In many small conflicts, their stealthy approach has led them to overtake the larger forces of PanOceania. Their troops are hardened soldiers and veterans, locals adapted to the harsh environments of the world, using every available advantage to creep onto their foe. White Banner focuses on strong core fire teams, often fielding some heavy infantry but not being entirely shackled by it. They have units with great terrain capabilities, which allow them to move up to the board and strike opponents at angles while having an excellent midfield presence. Monks allow the faction to close up with their smoke grenades and hit with their excellent melee strengths. White Banner is easily the strongest sectorial that Jing has access to. With amazing fire team options, great skirmishers, fast movements, and flexibility, they have it all. Their weaknesses is that some of their options are a little expensive. My recommendations for their units are the Monks, the Longja, the Guilongs, and the Jujaks. Descendants of the long-lost first human outer planet colony, Ariadna was thought to be long lost forever in a wormhole. Arriving at the deadly planet of Dawn, Ariadna are a less advanced nation, but with a core of people hardened by years of conflict and harsh environments. Their soldiers rely not on advanced technology, but on pure strength and ingenuity in the face of odds. Ariadna plays a strong midfield game. They have plenty of units available to help them control the board and apply constant pressure. They field cheap and versatile units, allowing for a more diverse list, where many units can complete objectives and offer a decent shooting or melee option. This is the army if you want to field as many small but effective troops. Ariadna is a strong asymmetric faction, but suffers from low technology that keep them behind others. Their strengths rely on their great midfield camouflage game. They have very cheap units that can play a surprisingly quick and direct offense. Their weaknesses is that they have very few options for any hackers, and overall have lower techs in comparison to other factions. Ancestors to the United States of America, USAriadna are a proud people, with their goal to colonize the new, harsh, and undiscovered lands of the alien planet Dawn on which they found themselves on. USAriadna continue to practice the old traditions of the United States of America. They love their guns, their firepower, and will go headstrong into any conflict, facing the melee alien threats of the planet. Ariadna wants to zoom up the board and get into the opponent's face. By using its fast, irregular pieces and strong fire teams, they are here to trade up against their forces, leaving them a hole big enough that not even the toughest opponent could withstand. Currently, they are fairly weak, but with a few strong out-of-take options. Their strengths lie in their great melee weapons, their fast sheep attackers that are surprisingly durable, and their infiltrating units. Their weaknesses is that they have very limited options when list building. For my recommendations, I would suggest the Unknown Ranger, the Grunts, the Mavericks, and the Devil Dog teams. Operating in the harshest conditions, the Tartary Armored Corps washes over the savage and deadly frontiers of Ariadna's capital. The attack is full of only the most experienced and hardly veteran troops, whose goal is survival and victory, and if they fail, they may yet face themselves against something even worse than death. The Tartary Armor Corps set a minefield of camo marker. Decoys, mines, and soldiers all hide within the midfield to distract your opponents. Meanwhile, you want to push your advantages with some excellent warbands and infiltrating specialists. Tartary also brings some very solid firepower to shoot down any AROs stopping you from completing the objective. If you want an army to play a deceptive, asymmetric game, this is one of the best choices. Currently, they are a decent army with many ways to approach encounters that suit their strengths and their weaknesses. They have great camouflage and specialist options, and strong warbands that aid the core fire teams. Their weaknesses is that their main fire pieces can be rather expensive, and still don't bring the equivalent weaponry to other factions. My recommendations are Cossacks, the Antipodes, and the Strelok. The Ariadnan Space Force is composed of some of the most elite and battle-hardened troops that they have to offer. Kosmoflot is a push to reach up for the stars and catch up to its technically superior neighbors. While they may not be as advanced as their foes, they strike with resolve and a ferocity that cannot be matched by others. Kosmoflot starts by using its incredible warbands to efficiently march up the board and clear a pathway for their versatile fire teams that are full of devastating shooting and melee pieces. They also come aside along with specialists to cover them. They strike hard and fast and can also serve a great defense line with camo units and linked shooting pieces to cover. Right now, they are the strongest sectorial choice for Ariadna. Their strengths lie in their amazing skirmishers and link team options. They have some of the access to the best units from the core faction. Their weaknesses is that they're not great at hacking, and they also have limited tech. My recommendations for Kosmoflot are the Bearpods, the Bolkolak, the Unknown Ranger, and USAriadna. Generations of clan battle and tradition form the people of the Highlander army. They are a proud sort that hold to their strengths and passions with great ferocity. The Caledonians are a furious and hostile horde that fight with their blades and guns in honor of their origins. They are warriors at first, who are always on the edge of battle, ready to strike at the opponent's neck. Caledonia makes full use of its fire teams, putting heavy weapons to shoot units with plenty of armor-piercing rounds. You also have strong melee units to go out and defuse the midfield, while fast specialists rush towards the objectives. With the variety of options that Caledonian has available, they make for a decent force. They have a variety of useful units and several good guns in a list, means they can cover their redundancies exceptionally well. Units can be rather frail and easy to kill, and they also have limited options when it comes to specialists. My recommendations for the Caledonians are William Wallace, the Highlander Greys, the SAS, and USAriadna. Caledonia is out of production as well. As an older army, it can be hard to find the models for them. The Merovingian Rapid Response Force are a strike team ready to shoot out at incredible speeds to defuse any conflict that may harm the interest of Ariadna. They are the first to reach conflicts. They can serve as extraction, primary battle force, or reinforcements ready to strike while the iron's hot, while having the discipline to contact for more support when it is needed. With a lot of troops having varying amounts of equipment, they tend to be a versatile mix of fast units that can switch up quickly and take your opponents by surprise. Right now, they are rather weak sectorial, with limited options to take. Their strengths lie in the big range of equipment that they have, and that they are also not very common. Their weaknesses is that they have mostly inefficient units. They trade away some of the stronger Ariadna pieces. My recommendations are Jaxbrant, the Moblot, the Chasseur, and the Briscards. Currently, the response force is out of production, and they can be hard to find models for them. Haqqislam is a society that comes to redefine its ancient roots, and give them a new humanistic meaning. They prioritize knowledge and progress overall. With a control over silk, they have a vast resource to terraform their own utopia. Having some of the best doctors, they are skilled in modern medicine. The true goal for Haqqislam is a search for greater wisdom, a knowledge that will lead them to a complete and total union with the divine. Haqqislam is a faction that uses indirect engagements as a goal. They have the tools to trade up incredibly well, and while they may not necessarily win a straight firefight, when you use their advantages, they trade against pieces better than any other faction. Haqqislam looks to always initiate engagements that put opponents in an uncomfortable position. Their goal is to send several berry sheep units that work entirely by their own orders to chip away at enemy forces, and make way for the stronger pieces to remove the head of the force entirely. With exceptionally sheep specialists, they can then control objectives completely unopposed. Currently, Haqqislam is an incredibly strong faction, with many options to take. Their strength lies in their sheep and strong irregular units, access to amazing specialist options, and a variety of troop choices and approaches to combat. Their main weakness is that they don't have the best shooting tools in comparison to other factions, but they easily make up for this with their incredible indirect attacks and their sheep pieces. Ramah Task Force serve as the first reaction when a conflict erupts in Haqqislam. They are the trained soldiers who mean to defend the common folk even when situations turn dire. They are the pillar of strength for the Haqqislamite people, one that they can feel secure to grasp onto. Ramah Task Force fields some of the greatest fireteam options in the faction. They bring to the table a solid long-range firepower. They're a straightforward faction that plays well around their fire teams and can have other small specialists to move around the board and complete their objectives. They play best taking advantage of range bans, but still being able to play a close-range battle. Right now, they are a solid faction that's missing some strong options from the main. Their strength is that they have some of the best shooting firepower in the Haqqislam faction. Their weaknesses is that they lack a lot of the indirect tools and irregulars that Haqqislam is known for. My recommendations for Ramah Task Force are the Mukhtars, the Sayyidins, Yarahadad, and the Ghulams. Hassassin Bahram strikes fast. They obscure themselves through cloth and dust. They tend to sever problems before they arise, directly striking at the head. A branch of military intelligence harboring deep secrecy and fatal approaches to operations. Their soldiers are equipped to fight in tricky terrain, where they control advantages using every piece of cover as an opportunity to strike. Soldiers that strike without fear, accepting their death in sacrifice to a greater power. Hassassin Bahram hones in on the many asymmetric tools that Haqqislam has to offer as a faction. Playing with hidden deployment units, infiltrating enemy deployment zones with impersonators to cause problems for your opponent as soon as the game starts. Assassins are a Swiss army knife that can tackle opponents in a multitude of directions, and their firepower is nothing to scoff at, having access to one of the best heavy infantry units that can be put in a very sheep fireteam for bonuses, as well as some of the best and cheapest reaction pieces in the game that start in camouflage. Assassins bring almost all the positives that Haqqislam has to access to, while also bringing the bonus that fire teams provide. Because of this, they are a very strong sectorial. Their strengths are that they're great in both defense and offense. They can approach fights in a variety of ways, access to some of the cheapest and most efficient tools of any sectorial. Their weaknesses is that they don't have the best long-range options. My recommendations are the Murawa, the Dailami, the Fide, and the Asawira. The Doors people are a security and naval force. They are a sword that protects the many operating commercial, trading, and resources that come through the Haqqislamite sphere. Their troops are composed of both domestic and foreign forces that hold together to ensure security over its territory and the various commercial districts in which it spans. They move to the board. Qapu khalqi move to the board using firepower pieces like the Azrael, while having sheep airdrop units to harass enemy defenses. Currently, they are one of the weakest factions in the game. Their strengths lie in a variety of troops to mix between different factions. They're also not super common. Their weaknesses is that they have a very basic composition that has no clear standout units. My recommendations for Qapu khalqi are the Azrael. To note, Qapu khalqi are out of production currently. A coalition between 3 colossal spaceships whose inhabitants have grown dissatisfied with the other nation's status quo. Although small, the Nomads are one of the most diverse factions, boasting people from all different backgrounds. They trade and travel across the planets to sustain their hyper-capital ships. Nomads like to set up a strong midfield network with mines and repeaters to protect objectives and keep opponents from playing efficiently. You want to use pieces like the Overflow Commando to move forward and take out important enemy units, then fire with heavy weaponry like the Salamandra and take down any defending AROs. Currently, Nomads are a very strong faction. The strengths of the Nomads lie in some of the best defense pieces in the game. They have an extremely powerful and potent hacking network, pieces with a lot of indirect warfare, and they have very undercosted units. Their weakness is that they can be fragile if your opponent knows how to play around them. The military of Corregidor are a semi-mercenary group in themselves. That allows them to keep themselves in top shape despite of what others may say against their unprofessional attitude. Their ratty, unruly conduct is what makes them such formidable soldiers. They are skilled in zero-gravity operations, which makes them excellent at dealing with any boarding operation. Corregidor wants to use its fire teams as a center and point of strength. With strong firepower pieces, the Corregidor army allows a light force to dispatch foes from afar. Like most of Nomads, they set up an incredible, formidable hacking defense, using units like the Morats. Once they've established a solid defense, other units like the Hellcat can come down from the sky to dispatch key foes and complete objectives. Right now, they are a rather weak sectorial, and they have been hit pretty hard by recent nerfs. Their strengths are their great shooting pieces and their solid defensive hacking lines. Their weakness is that they have bad lieutenant options. They're also very SWC hungry. My recommendations for Corregidor are the Morans, Belli, the Evaders, and Macmaro. Bakunin exists as a society of visionaries and extreme radicals that somehow manage to mix and uphold a strong yet peculiar society. Genetically modified humans, religious extremists, anarchists, and all kinds of strange folk exist together in the capital ship of Bakunin, in contempt of mainstream society. This diverse group is fully represented in their defense force. Bakunin wants to set up strong ARO pieces to block out opponents with linked units, pushing up with sheep and strong warbands that excel in melee combat. Then they move up with fire teams to push buttons and make firefights with modifiers that greatly benefit them. Currently, they are one of the strongest sectorials in the game. Their strengths rely on their very sheep pieces, some superiorly strong fire team options, amazing sheep warbands, and are generally very versatile. Their weaknesses is that their fire teams can be rather expansive, and they can be rather tricky to handle on the first time. My recommendations are the Uberful Commando, the Riot Girls, the Die Morlock Group, and the Reverence. Tunguska is business. They are the corporations that work under and over every shady and official deal that comes through the Nomad sphere. Databanks filled to the brim with expensive information. Because of this, their military force has a very high budget. They are the maximum security that holds together all the transactions after all. Tunguska excels at hacking, with some of the most powerful hacking options that can be taken in fireteams. They also offer some great attack pieces that have unique abilities, like the Puppet Tactica and the motorcycle robot Sun Naraka, allowing for a two-prone approach to combat. They can also offer great firepower with their linkable heavy infantry units. They strike fast and with power, while setting up jammers and repeaters along the midfield. Currently, they're not as strong as the other sectorials. Their strengths is that they have great remotes and peripheral pieces, and also have some of the best hackers in the game. Their weakness is that they have expensive firepower units, limited fireteam options. My recommendations for Tunguska are the Synodica, the Grensers, the Sellenkriegers, and the Innerbenners. The Combined Army is the will of the evolved intelligence, an ever-expanding alien AI that seeks to subjugate the galaxy's factions under its control, to eventually reach a higher evolutionary plane. They set their eyes on the human sphere and are slowly encroaching into it as humanity is set to face the most dangerous threat to its existence. Relying on very expensive and efficient pieces, the Combined Army holds some of the most powerful units in the game. They use these units to out-hack their opponents and push forward with high armor and versatile technical pieces that can bring down entire groups just by themselves. They play a game of efficiency, almost better than any other faction, and back it up by an incredibly tricky and order-taxing hacking defense. The Combined Army is one of the best factions in the game. The strengths of the Combined Army is that they have some of the best elite troops in the game, with unique abilities that help them stand out, and very cheap orders to back them up as well, combined with a plentitude of cheap midfield warbands. They also have the best hackers in the entire game. Their weakness is that they rely on several expensive units, but they are usually worth the price given the output that they give out. Extreme discipline and unwavering loyalty is what define the Morats. Morats are a hierarchical society that hone themselves in the art of war. They do not care for personal glory or honor, only in the strength of their military force. They believe that the greatest power is strength and force, and by side to the evolved intelligence, they will be some of the best the Combined Army has to offer, and one of the strongest warriors at their side. The playstyle of the Morats is that they want to use cheap warbands like the Tartary to cover the advance of more powerful close-range units. They use very well fire teams that are supported by hacking and powerful melee options. These fire teams also serve as an offensive death bolt that can take out any troop with the right tactics. Currently, the Morats are one of the strongest sectorials that the Combined Army has access to. Most of the units have veteran. You can put almost any of the units into a fire team with pure bonuses, and they also have strong individual pieces that can hold their own in melee and shooting. Their main weaknesses is that they depend on specific units. My recommendations for the Morats are the Dartok, the Kaitok, the Daturatsi, and Kornak. Stalking through the night, the harbingers of terror. Shasvastii presents a force full of deadly assassins and shape-shifting horrors. They bring a subterfuge to the Combined Army that allows them to crawl inside the line of their opponents. They are hunters who prefer light armor that stalk from the shadows. A cunning foe who brings fear as its main weapon. Shasvastii is an asymmetric faction. They play best by causing fear in your opponents, hiding units and obscuring information. When you strike, you want it to be catastrophic for them. Strong melee and fast units help Shasvastii move forward and conquer the board, while completing objectives. Obscured and deadly ARO pieces are always a threat to the opponent that they have to play around. Shasvastii, power-wise, are middle of the road, but when piloted right, they could be quite strong. Their strengths lie in their elements of fear. They're tricky, but at times very effective pieces, and they're very strong warbands. Their weakness is that they don't have a lot of great fireteam options. It often feels like you're playing a glass cannon with them. My recommendations for Shasvastii are the Caliban, the Noctifer, the Speculo Killer, and the Taiga. The Onyx Contact Force are a set of elite units deployed by the Evolved Intelligence to perform a quick and often fatal mission. They work entirely self-sufficient and are tasked with employing heavy-handed diplomatic approaches, often forcing others to join their cause or die and be taken by force. Onyx rely on their firepower, tech, and shooting prowess to hold spaces for their special units. Fielding a strong core fire team with remotes allows Onyx to put up a solid durable ranged defense line and dedicate its efforts to other pieces, like using some of the stronger attacks, like the Sphinx, to climb through buildings and strike down at foes. A great faction to clear up models through ranged superiority. Onyx are the weakest of the combined army sectorials, lacking some of the strengths of the overall faction. Their strengths is that they have a good structure base, with some decent hacking options and strong tags. Their weakness is that despite their strengths, they lack strong pieces that other armies have easy access to, and have to default to weaker options. My recommendations for Onyx are the Sphinx, Bid and Kiss, the Narcius, and the Junidron fire teams. Led by the power of a great singular AI, Aleph oversees the human sphere. It is a machine to help progress and aid humanity. Like the Evolved Intelligence, Aleph does not stand alone. They have the most advanced technology in the human sphere and uses to balance control over it. Using strong genetically engineered and recreated soldiers from legends and history, Aleph stands as a pillar of humanity, and while not all agree with its role, it is for sure here to stay. Aleph at its disposal have access to many units with structure, whether those be peripherals or others. A great example of this are the post-humans, soldiers that can move through several bodies at once, jumping consciousness through one another. Aleph plays best when they push these advantages, using their fast specialists to clear out objectives, and moving in with deadly firepower pieces, using eclipse grenades onto your opponent's boards. They have great coverage when it comes to both attack and defensive tools. Currently, Aleph are a very strong factions with access to some exceptionally good elite forces. The strengths of Aleph are the strong and fast individual units that can be extremely versatile. Their weakness are the highly specialized and aggressive force are usually Steel Phalanx was created by the Advanced Intelligence to serve as a hammer against threats to the human sphere. The legendary soldier Achilles commands the Steel Phalanx along with its many other heroic characters. They are an unyielding force that carry their creed on their shoulder and are as deadly as they are flashy. Steel Phalanx is home to the deadliest fire team in the game. Every soldier is covered with amazing abilities, being able to fight, shoot, and cover each other exceptionally well. Using their fire teams, they can easily move to the board with their eclipse grenades and strike out when necessary to complete objectives and destroy core enemy pieces. They are an unstoppable death force. Currently, Steel Phalanx is arguably one of the strongest sectorials in the game. Their strength lies with the units with vast mimetism, great survivability, amazing shooting in melee, able to use smoke and eclipse grenades, and often double as great specialists to take. Their weaknesses is that they like to play aggressive, around fire teams, and can be vulnerable to indirect attacks. My recommendations for Steel Phalanx are Eudoros, the Myrmidons, Phoenix, and Pandora. The Special Situations sections exist as a force to keep advanced intelligence inside the control of O12 and Aleph. They are a special force designed to hunt down the proliferation of illegal and dangerous advanced technologies that could extend itself past human control. The OSSS are a professional force and poignant, ready to strike when the time deems necessary with inhuman precision. The OSS bring a list full of technical pieces that combine with each other exceptionally well, often running around a pure fire team of Dakini bots. OSS have some of the strongest shooting in fire teams, being able to lay down defensive planes around the map and easily shooting down enemy AROs. Apart from a strong core, you will want to use the post-humans as a variety of extremely useful and expendable specialists, or defensive pieces that can be used aggressively without the fear of losing one's order. Currently, they're a decent faction that plays to their strengths, but they lack some of the core choices that make Alphas strong. For their strengths, they have very strong shooting, with remote presence pieces and access to unique pieces like the posthuman. Their weakness is that they lack smoke, have fragile gun pieces, and are very hackable. My recommendations for the OSS are the posthumans, the Dakinis, and the Shukra. O12 serves as a governing power over the human sphere. They are regulators and mediators of factions across nations. They are the judge and jury of conflict, and their forces are highly advanced, which only the elite and the highly trained are allowed access to. They uphold the peace and protect weaker factions from others. O12 finds themselves often playing to different strengths game to game. This is because they have access to one of the most varied arsenals across factions. They can do everything. They have strong midfield specialists to push buttons, drop troops that can make a hole in your opponents, reliable hackers, and durable tags with explosive weaponry. They have a little bit of everything, and each list can play rather differently. Right now, O12 is fairly middle ground when it comes to their power. They can do a bit of everything, but end up paying a lot because of that. Their strengths, they have access to a lot of the strategies in the game. For their weaknesses, it's mostly the limited options that can feel rather expensive. Starmada is the frontal force of the Baro Aegis. They police the conflicts all over the human sphere, and face foes aliens to humankind, with cunning and powerful weaponry. Starmada use fast specialists to score missions over the opponents before they can get ahead. With a plethora of orders, Starmada can do objectives and kill enemy units in the same turn. They play fast and back themselves up with a corps of light infantry to burst down any aggressors. Currently, Starmada is a pretty decent force. They have very clear strengths and are backed up with a versatile amount of units. Their strengths are the strong pieces that work amazingly together. Their weakness is that they can suffer to indirect attacks and work best when focusing on specific tasks. My recommendation for Starmada are the Raven Eyes, the Robots, the Barangians, and the Cyber Ghost. Torchlight Brigade is a secret program composed of only the best units that the Baro Aegis has. They operate as a police force for the most remote places in the human sphere, and they serve as defenders for future planets of humankind. Torchlight Brigade focuses on using heavy infantry soldiers in a core fire team. They win through thick defense and oppressive gunfire. They are also backed by sheep specialists that can place mines to defend objectives and your deployment. They are aggressive, versatile, and durable. Currently, Torchlight Brigade is very strong. They're exceptionally good for new players, as they're one of the most recent factions that have come out. Their strengths are in their solid attack pieces, their durable infantry, and strong fireteam options. Their weakness is that all their units are rather expensive, they have hackable pieces, and lack smoke. My recommendations for Torchlight Brigade are the Silver Star Prime, the Raven Eye, the Hellblazers, and the Moonrakers. The Toha are an advanced alien civilization in direct opposition and open war against the evolved intelligence and the combined army forces. They are skilled in biotechnology, being able to modify themselves and have access to deadly biodegrading attacks. Against the evolved intelligence, Toha find themselves in an alliance with humanity to protect themselves and strike away the ever-encroaching forces of the combined army. They are pragmatic and ruthless, but when facing such a great foe, this nature is supremely useful. Toha are one of the most unique factions in the game, having access to various amounts of unique rules. Toha tend to play in fire teams of tree, with tools like symbiomates working as both weapons and defense to the units attached. In addition, Toha can use pheromones to make biological attacks like a hacking program onto units who are normally not able to be hacked, forming a faction that has easy access to strong and indirect attacks. Toha also have access to great multi-wound armored reaction pieces to watch the board. Currently, Toha can be exceptionally strong in the right hands. Their strengths is that they're an extremely unique faction. They cover themselves very well, they're hard-hitting, and their indirect attacks can be devastating if your opponent is not prepared to deal with them. Their weakness is that they are a tricky faction with countless unique rules that forces you to approach the game in a very odd way. My recommendations for the Toha are the Sukiel Commandos, Jan Star, the Takiel Officers, and the Sakiel. Druze are the most powerful criminal organization in the Submundo underworld. They deal throughout the human sphere. Bahram Security is a special section that are composed of hardened shock troops and make up some of the toughest defense that Druze has access to. Their name alone in an operation is so feared that it drives away any would-be offenders. Druze are the bombing faction. They, like their name implies, are quite literally a shock team that makes great use of speculative fire rule to throw grenades far and wide across the board, even without many targets. Apart from this, Druze has great warbands and some interesting tags to field into battle, being able to cover their fragile units. Druze are a fairly gimmicky faction that can be great in the right hands, but usually struggle. Their strengths is that they have a lot of units that play double roles, great use of speculative fire, a range of good warband and fast pieces to take from. Their weakness is that they're extremely fragile and have very few choices in composition. My recommendation for Druze are the Brawlers, the Druze Shock Team, and the Juan. Years of humiliation and subservice to their greater power, Japan finally freed themselves from the clutches of Jing and declared themselves their own free nation, not aligned to any particular group. The new Japan has been built by the law of the samurai. Bushido is the way of the new Japan, a strict ideological standpoint, one that countless others will find hard to break down. JSA plays best at a fairly close range. They close up with fast motorcycles, laying paths of smoke grenades for their heavy infantry fire teams. JSA is not afraid to pick fights, in melee either. What you get when playing the samurai is a fast, in-your-face army that works best as a rapid offense that decimates enemy lines. Currently, JSA is a well-rounded force, but can find itself outmatched by other armies in comparison. Their strengths is that they have a cheap heavy infantry with great melee options, they're fast and elusive troops, and they're strong infiltrators. Their weakness is that they lack some range fire piece options, have some rather low stats compared to other factions, and can be rather finicky to pilot. My recommendations for JSA are Jojimbo, the Tanko, Oniwaban, and the Ryuken. The most despicable mercenary group. Ikari Company is mostly composed of Japanese troops and has a reputation for committing horrific operations if the money is right. They are no samurai and have no need for honor. Instead, they follow the ronin, a blade for hire if the coin is right. Ikari plays a straightforward game, using efficient and cheap troops to push into the enemy zone and strike them head on. They also have access to cheap airborne units that allow them to jump in the middle of objectives and enemy territory to take out important pieces. Right now, Ikari Company are fairly middle of the road when it comes to power. They have access to cheap fast attack pieces, but their weakness is that they have weak hacking and fairly low amounts of board control. My recommendations for the Ikari Company are the Juan, the Desperados, the Tankos, and the Diggers. As a pseudo-nomad sectorial, Starco has access to many of the tools that make nomads as strong as they are. They come in with strong hacking network and defense, and their special unique characters allow them to link up and form a deadly firing pieces that can decimate opponents from afar. Currently, Starco relies a lot on their characters, and it is what makes or break the faction. Their strengths lie in their unique characters that allow them to have fairly decent specialists and good shooting. They also have a decent hacking section. Their main weakness is that they don't have a lot of good lieutenant options, and their lists are usually fairly limited and one-sided. My recommendations for Starco are Nauf, the Uhahu, the Irmandijos, and the Riot Girls. Composed of notorious champions of the deadly sports game Aristea, Foreign Company is a very glamorous and intensive force that is connected through the web of media which they use to advertise themselves and be hired to protect its many co-stars. Eccentric personalities and extremely skilled fighters all reside within the contracts of the Foreign Company. Foreign Company are a mix of very niche tools thrown into a toolbox. They have weird synergies that often don't work out too well for them. In any case, they want to use those tools to disorient their opponent. Like their descriptions, their set of flashy characters have a multitude of abilities and equipment that allow them to switch tactics on a fly. Currently, they are in an odd and weak spot. Their strengths are the access to the variety of tools that can be very strong in the right occasions. Their weakness is that their fire teams and compositions don't tend to make the best use of the units they have access to. My recommendations for Foreign Company are Laxmi, the Bolts, Zeros, and Senor Massacre. Professional soldiers of the Boyle Corporation owned by Quad Fahesh, a speculated leader of the Submundo underworld, the biggest criminal ring in the human sphere. The Dashat Company operate a strict and discreet operation. They have no interest in their employer's goals or morals. If they pay, Dashat will get it done in a professional and timely manner. Dashat wants to make use of their sheep irregulars to strike and defend against attacks. Their fire team options allow them to build a durable and straightforward team that allows them to move forward with good shooting and melee options, while also completing the objective. Currently, the Dashat Company are a decently strong faction with some best-in-class tools. Their strengths are their strong sheep irregular pieces that can be surprisingly devastating. Strong fire team's flexibility also make up the core of Dashat. Their main weaknesses are their limiting hackers without any killer hacking device profiles to speak of, and their obvious lieutenant options. My recommendations are going to be the Libertos, the Diggers, the Magariba Guard, and the Sujongs. The White Company is a small mercenary group led by the legendary and renowned Colonel John Hawkwood, said to be unauthorized Aleph recreation. By signing with the SSS, White Company has become a key group to both PanOceania and Jing. Operating from the snowy planet of Smallerheima, White Company is a traveling group. With ties to many of the local factions, they are composed of both former soldiers from Jing and PanOceania. Shooting with some of the best gunfighters the game has, White Co can blow a hole through any list with their ability to cover them with smoke. Being able to stack both shootings and hacking modifiers in link teams allow White Company to fight battles greatly in their odds, but one bad dice is enough to blow them out, so you must position yourself carefully. Currently, White Company is strong, but with very clear strengths and weaknesses. Those strengths composed of their great shooting pieces that have access to smoke, flexible fire team options, and plenty of tank-busting weaponry. Their weakness is that they rely on some glass cannon units. My recommendations for White Company are the Karhu, John Hawkwood, the Haidao, and the Barangian. Composed of many units from the Toha army, Spiral Corps is a private military force based on the planet of Varuna. Despite its strange composition, Spiral Corps has a reputation for helping companies manage security, integrity, and political risks when it comes to hostile situations. Spiral Corps makes use of some of the best defensive tools in the games with some of the indirect fire powers of Toha. They plant impersonators and camo markers to lay aggression and defense at the same time. Their access to Fairware also gives them an effective attack against targets. They are a precise glass hammer that can shatter in an instant or destroy the enemy. Even more than Toha, they are a tricky faction that is strong in the right hands, but weak to inexperienced tactics. Their strengths rely on their strong defense, the asymmetric options of Toha, with some extra defense options. They are fairly fragile and one of the most complex and tricky factions to pilot. My recommendations for units are the Takma, the Kaelter, the Helots, and the Drawl. We've reached the end of the factions for Infinity. Thank you again for sticking through the video and watching. And a reminder that this is all from my point of view and the research that I've done. And let me know what kind of content you'd like to see in the future, and any improvements I could make. This video took me quite a lot of hours to make, definitely more than the other videos, so yeah. You're welcome to subscribe if you like the video. I'll definitely be making more content in the future. I'll see you around next time. Take care.